I've been experiencing some weird things in my house for years now. I think it started back in 2011. Let me explain. I came back from school with my siblings and my mother. I was 12, I think. We arrived at home and I took off my shoes and ran upstairs. I peeked inside my sister's room as I was walking towards my room, and that's when I realized something was wrong. It was all messy and everything was out of their place. I told my mom as I feared somebody had broken in, but we checked all the doors and the windows and they were locked. Now you can imagine my surprise when I saw that my room was also messy. My clothes and my mattress were on the floor and everything just seemed wrong, as if somebody had done it out of hate. We all got the creeps when we saw my sister's stuffed animals. They were scratched, torn apart, like if some sort of animal had gotten inside my house. But as I said, every possible entrance was locked. We never knew what happened that day. Things were normal for years after that occurrence, but then in 2014, I think, some really creepy stuff started to happen. One day I was alone in my house. It was a school day, but I had faked a stomach ache, so I stayed home. I have a TV in my room, so I just left my room to get some food or go to the bathroom. I was minding my own business watching something on Netflix, when suddenly I saw a human-shaped figure walking past my room. It was tall and thin, and it took the shadow a few seconds to escape my eyesight, but it felt like an eternity. It went into my sister's room, and I think it was walking out of my mom's room. Now, as you can imagine, I was freaked out. I locked my door and tried to get my mind off of it, and told no one about this at first. This is where the story gets even more scarier. My room is very big, because I share it with my brother. And one night, my sister came to our room and asked if she could sleep in the small couch we have in our room. I didn't answer, as it was really late and I just wanted to go back to sleep. But my brother did, as they are very close. We all went to sleep, and the next day, she told us she was scared but didn't tell us why. That of course made me nervous, because my sister is really mature, and it was very rare to see her scared. We went on with our day, and when the night came, me and my brother heard my sister arguing with my mom. We went in and started to hear the conversation. My sister was crying and seemed very scared and mad. I remember she said that my mom was trying to creep her out, and she ran to her room. We asked my mom what was wrong with my sister, and she told us why my sister was so scared. She said as she was falling asleep, she felt as if somebody was sitting on her bed, and then she saw a shadow standing close to her bed. Obviously, I was creeped out. My mom had also told us she had seen this shadow walking by, but that she wasn't scared of it. My brother told me that one night he was trying to fall asleep after being on the phone for hours. I was already asleep by then, but he recalls hearing a faint whistling sound that immediately caught his attention. The whistling was coming from my bed. He said it was very clear and loud, and that's what freaked him out. So imagine that something was next to me whistling while I was asleep. I forget to mention that my doorbell would ring every day at 3. It all started when one day we were all eating in my kitchen and somebody rang our doorbell. One of us got to the door just to realize nobody was there. We didn't really care because we thought it was a kid pulling a prank on us. But the next day it rang again and again, and nobody was there. And that of course kept happening. Sometimes it was at 3 o'clock exactly. Sometimes it was at 3:01 or 3:02. One day, my mom was outside my house, and at 3 o'clock, she was back from the store or something. When she was about to walk towards the door, she swears she saw as if somebody was pressing the doorbell button. And we disconnected our doorbell after that. Finally, one day I was alone in my room. I was using my iPod while it was charging. I was minding my own business when suddenly my iPod decided to throw itself to the ground. It felt as if somebody had pushed it very hard and out of my hand. The push was so hard that it disconnected the charger and dropped my iPod so hard that the screen shattered completely. Whatever is living in my house really hates us. Those were some of the strange things that have happened in my house. Not all of them.
This just happened about 2 hours ago, and I'm still shaking. I live on the coast of SC, and my backyard is directly on the marshland. So I woke up and went downstairs to use the bathroom. I kept having this weird nagging feeling like I was forgetting something or that something was off, so I went to find my mother. She's a night owl and she stays up super late doing gardening and stuff like that, She even likes to feed the raccoons. So I went to my backyard, and I then see her standing there about 100 feet from the back door facing the marshland. I called out for her, but she didn't hear me, so I just started walking out towards her. Once I started getting closer, she turned to face me with a completely blank expression. I asked her what was wrong. I was about 12 feet away from her, and she turned back towards the marshland again. Then, the back door swings open, and I turn to see my mother standing on the deck, and she's calling out to ask me what I'm doing. I've never ran so fast in my life, but as I looked back to the marsh, I could just see that thing disappearing, whatever it was. It looked just like my mum did. I yelled at my mum to go inside and that there was something out there. I told her exactly what I'd seen, and I started shaking and crying. We woke up my husband and dad, and they think I must have just been in a sleep state or that I dreamed it, but I can't stop shaking. The craziest thing is that I could see footprints from where she was standing. I know I didn't just see this in my head. I know I'm not losing my mind.
Hello, everybody. I wanted to share details of regular unexplained and paranormal activity that has been occurring at our family home for nearly 30 years. The activity ranges from cold spots and noises to moving shadows and full-on apparitions. In turn, each family member has heard or witnessed something, but some more than others. I'm interested to read what people's thoughts are on the matter, and if anybody else has experienced such things, you should write them down. I grew up in Salford, near Manchester in the UK, and we moved into what is a 2-up, 2-down council house in and around 1990 or 1991. During that period of time, it was myself, my parents, and my younger brother. I'm not sure when the activity first started precisely, but I'm aware that it is within a couple years of us moving in. My brother from an early age complained of being disturbed at night by an old man, and on several occasions would wake up and inform my grandmother, who would babysit of an evening whilst my parents were out. He would say that the man had told him to wake up for school. As far as I knew, this was chalked up to bad dreams, or a vivid imagination. However, the instances of my brother seeing this old man became more frequent and started to occur during the daytime. My mom recalls a particular day when my brother dashed downstairs, visibly upset, telling her that the man was following him and was walking down the stairs. She checked the staircase, but nobody was there. It was around this time that she had her initial encounter with the old man. When vacuuming the living room, she described seeing a pair of legs in pressed, pinstripe trousers and a knitted tank top on the torso. She says that from the bottom, the apparition was almost like a living person, which stood in the room, but then it started to fade towards the top of the body, with the head of course and the face barely visible. She remembers throwing the vacuum in the direction of the figure and running through to the back of the house and outside. A few days later, she told her neighbor about what she had seen. The neighbor, of course, as you might imagine, was a little bit disturbed, and told her that who she was describing was a previous occupier, an elderly man by the name Fred. He had passed away in the house, and it was a couple of years after his wife. Fred was seen on several occasions shortly after, again by my mom and brother, but also my grandmother. My grandmother told me years later of her experience, that she was helping my mom do some work in our garden when she saw an elderly man walk out of our back door and across the garden, vanishing as he walked. She told my mom of what she had seen, who in turn told her about the elderly man who seemed to be haunting the house. Although he didn't seem threatening, it really unsettled my grandmother, and coupled with my brother's encounters, she refused to take care of us at the house, and instead we spent a lot of time at hers. To this day, she isn't particularly fond of visiting my parents' home. From then on out, sounds of walking around in the bedrooms or on the stairs upstairs when nobody was in or out of them ended up increasing, and items disappearing or being moved around became a part of the norm, particularly for my mom. We did notice that the activity was more persistent around summertime. My mom was, and still is, the person who witnessed the most activity out of all of us. Whether this was because she was in the house more or she is particularly sensitive, I'm not sure. But I believe a lot of the activity can be explained logically. What is interesting, however, is that when our parents decided to move my brother and I into different rooms, my brother seemingly stopped being disturbed by Fred, but my mom experienced more. I personally didn't experience anything until I was 14 or 15 years old, when in the early hours of the morning, I heard continuous, almost deliberate footsteps around the stairs and landing area. I remember waking up, quite annoyed of course, believing it to be my dad having a relentless night. And of course, as you'd imagine, all I wanted was enough sleep for school the next day. I called out to him to shut up and go to bed. That's when the noise suddenly stopped. No noise of feet returning to the bedroom or going downstairs. Just complete silence. Around a minute or two later, my bedroom door flung open and hit the wall. I remember jolting up and seeing nothing in the doorway, but the sound of footsteps started moving around my room. I yelled out to my parents and dived under the covers. My dad rushed down the landing and the footsteps stopped just as he came into the room. I had told him what had happened and that I was frightened. He didn't laugh it off or tell me it was nothing to worry about, but instead told me to get into the bed with my mom and that he would stay in my room for the rest of the night. I found out a few years later that this was a regular occurrence for my parents, constantly being woken up by footsteps on the landing and stairs as well as around the perimeter of their bed. My parents seemed unnerved that something had started to disturb another one of their children. I'm aware that this post is becoming very lengthy, but there's so much more to tell you guys, especially as we now have a younger sister who is having her own unusual experiences. I live in my own home with my little family, and it seems to be spirit-free. But even to this day, I find I'm having conversations with my parents about the unusual activity happening in their home. The most concerning so far has been of a dark figure sitting cross-legged in the corner of my brother's room around 4 or 5 years ago. He says that he felt like it watched him for an extended length of time, and that when he tried to ignore it, he could feel and hear tapping on the headboard of his bed. Eventually, it ended up being too much for him, and he vaulted out of bed, past the figure that was sitting in the corner, and out of the room and vomited in the bathroom with fright. However, as a true show of masculinity and the obvious need to get some sleep for an early start, he went back to bed, enduring the tappings again and told whatever to go to hell, because he had work in the morning. For the past few years, my 11-year-old sister has experienced a lot of knocking noise around her headboard, similar to the ones my brother experienced the night he saw the dark figure. It's important to point out that these are occurring in different rooms and on different types of headboards. My brother's are leather and wood. My sister's are iron frame. Since a youngster, she has preferred to stay in my parents' room, but from the age of 7 or 8 years old, they knew they needed to get her out of the habit. Nowadays, my sister has it initially okay with going to bed in her room, but she gets disturbed around the same time every other night by knocking sounds on her bed and finds her way back to my parents' bedroom. As far as I'm aware, she hasn't seen anything unusual, but she definitely isn't keen on being alone in her room for long periods of time and has complained to me in the private that she thinks somebody watches her. My parents are reluctant to talk to her about what might be happening and the family's past experiences as my sister gets easily spooked. They have asked myself and my brother not to elaborate on what she may be experiencing. My belief is that it could be attributed to the telekinesis theory of young children, especially those nearing or going through puberty, which can make things happen around them without realizing. But my mom is on the firm understanding that my sister may be encountering a spirit. My mom has recalled the following story a couple of times to me. I'm not sure I believe it to what she thinks it is, but I find it fascinating nonetheless. On the night my grandfather was dying, a little over 10 years ago, my dad had been told to come to the hospital with his siblings. My mom was heavily pregnant at the time and chose to stay at home and await the news. She remembers sitting in the living room watching TV when she could hear knocking on the front window and on the front door. It is a knock that members of our family do when visiting our house. My mom assumed a relative had come over regarding my granddad and looked out of the window to see who it was. The only thing is, nobody was there. She thought it unusual, but brushed it off and went into the kitchen to make a cup of tea. Again, the noise of tapping on the window and the front door happened again. But as she was about to see what it was, the noise of running came from across the landing and down the stairs, stopping at the front door. Thinking it was my brother and something was wrong, she went to go investigate. Nothing though. She said she had the most uneasiest feeling at this point, and something just felt very off. Shortly after, my mom received a call from my dad, informing her that my grandfather had passed away. That's when she realized the knocking had happened around the same time he passed away. To this day, my mom believes that my grandfather may have been trying to visit his son, and Fred wasn't happy about another spirit entering the home. I think it's possible that with my grandfather's death imminent, tension and emotion would have been high, and that could be a psychological thing on my mom's part. That said, I don't think she has made it up. It genuinely unnerves her even now, but it may have been her mind playing tricks rather than paranormal. However, this is one of my favorite stories of unusual activity at our home, and it does make others feel uneasy when I tell them.
I first heard this story when I was in college. I'd come home from winter break, and I remember it was just me and my dad in the house. I was watching some kind of ghost hunters program on TV, just for the laughs. I really don't believe any of that. Now when you watch the programs on TV like that, it's so obvious that they're fake. It's too hard for me to let them go into my head and believe them. I mean really, I just can't get into it. Now my dad was the same way, so I thought. He seemed interested in the paranormal, but only very slightly. He was the kind of guy who would often scoff at anything supernatural. The program I was watching flipped to a commercial, and I casually got up and found my dad in the kitchen. Out of the blue, I asked him, "Hey Dad, do you believe in ghosts?" "Yup." His reply actually shocked me. "Really?" I was a bit taken back. "Like, it just doesn't seem like you," I said to him. He shrugged his shoulders and mulled over at what I just said. "Yeah," he replied eventually. "But I know ghosts are real. I met one." Upon hearing this statement, I had to know the full story. You see, my dad is like me. He likes to tell the stories. I could retell most of the stories from memory that he's told me, but just because he would tell me them so frequently, to anybody who would listen, here's my dad's story that I'd never actually heard, and it's an event that actually changed my dad's life. To this day, I don't know if I believe it or not, but when somebody is so influential in your life and tries telling you this, and they're so down to earth, you kind of have to believe it. Now though he never brings it up when I talk to him about it, I swear it's completely true. There is no exaggeration, and I have no doubt in my mind about what happened. So here is the story in my dad's words. It was back in the house in Tacoma, where you grew up until you were about 4. My parents still lived in the house, but I was going to college. I was back visiting them for the weekend. I was just over at the Tacoma Community College, so it wasn't that far away. I came back often to visit and get a home-cooked meal. I remembered that I was sitting down for dinner with my parents, just 3 of us. It was in late spring, early summer season, so it hadn't really gotten dark out yet. We were talking like normal, when the phone suddenly rang. It was in the kitchen. My mom got up and answered the phone, leaving my dad and me in the room together alone. After a short while, she called my dad into the kitchen as well. "Leo, can you come here for a moment?" I remembered she seemed worried, like her voice was shaken. My dad wiped his face, got up and joined my mum in the kitchen. They weren't in there for long, but they were quietly talking, and it felt strange. After a few moments they come out of the kitchen. They had their coats on now. "Something's up and we have to go out for a bit," my mum said. "There's dessert in the fridge, you just help yourself. Don't worry about the dishes. We'll do them when we get back." So my dad said nothing, but I could tell from the look on his face that it was serious. My mum looked genuinely worried. They were out of the door in a flash, and I left to finish my dinner at the table. I cleared the table and washed my plate, despite my mother's instructions. Then I went to the main room to read. I sat down on the sofa, opened one of my school books and began to relax. Hours went by, and my parents still hadn't come back yet, and it was around 11 o'clock. My parents still hadn't come back, so I went to get ready for bed. I walked up the stairs, making my way to the bathroom. I suddenly heard the strangest sound. I paused and listened for a while. It was the ceiling. The ceiling was making a slow, drawn-out whining noise. The wood was genuinely creaking. It wasn't an unusual sound. There was some unusual rhythm that made me feel uncomfortable and curious. After listening for a while, I pulled down the steps to the attic and listened a bit more. I could hear the sound more clearly now, along with a metallic creaking sound. I gathered up my courage and decided to investigate. Now I have to say, I wasn't scared. I did have an uneasy feeling. To be honest, after a few seconds though, I felt quite comfortable, even though it was very dark and eerie. The energy in the floor wasn't foreboding. It almost felt warm and inviting. As I looked around the attic, it soon became obvious where the sound was coming from. Among the boxes and various other storage items was an old rocking chair, one that belonged to my grandmother. It was one of the many possessions she had left with us at the house. She was in a nearby home for the elderly, and couldn't fit much of her belongings into the room. The rocking chair was gently rocking back and forth, causing the floorboard to creak beneath it. Next to the chair, there was also an old bird cage. The cage door was gently swinging open and closed, making a quiet metallic creak. I figured that it was just a draft, and knowing that the sounds would keep me up all night if I didn't put an end to it, I went out and wanted to find the source. I compared the corners of the room, but try as I might, I couldn't find the source of the draft, nor could I feel it myself. There were no windows and there wasn't much ventilation. It wasn't even windy outside. It was a calm evening. Furthermore, the chair was heavy as the birdcage was, yet there were other things nearby that weren't disturbed. There were stacks of paper and stuff like that. It really wasn't making much sense to me. After a while, I decided to give up and looked back at the chair. It was still gently rocking. I walked over to it and rested my arm on the armrest, and it suddenly stopped rocking. Still, I couldn't feel any kind of draft. I lifted my hand and the chair was calm and quiet, but as I turned away, I heard the creaking again. I turned back and the chair was still rocking. It was really strange, but as I said before, it wasn't really creeping me out much. I just shrugged it off and walked over to the birdcage. The door was still slowly swinging open and closed. The cage once housed a parrot that belonged to my grandmother, but it had been empty for a long time now. I figured that if I at least shut this, then I could stop one of the sounds. So I did that. I then started heading towards the steps. As I was about halfway down, I heard that same metallic creaking sound again. I looked behind me and the door was back open, swinging once again unlatched, right alongside the chair which continued rocking like before. Something had unlatched it. I sure hadn't done it myself. Now in any other circumstance, I would have been scared out of my mind, but for whatever reason, I wasn't. I just didn't feel easy. Now a rocking chair and a birdcage aren't really the most scary things anyway. I just ascended the attic with a last glance at the strange behaviour. I then went about my bedtime routine. The creaking sound continued for a while and I couldn't sleep for it. I went back downstairs to where I could hear the noise, and I continued reading. It was a little after midnight when my parents pulled into the driveway. They came in and found me reading and they sat down with me. My mum was crying. They explained to me that they had spent the night at the hospital where my grandmother had just passed away.
So a little bit of background story. I decided to ride my bike to and from work during the summer to save up a little more money to buy a nicer car. I was living in California's Central Valley, so it was hot during the day and warm at night, so not really a big deal. I rode my bike for roughly 3 months, 5 to 6 days a week, back and forth on the same path that led almost directly from my work and right to my house. One night we were getting out of work particularly late. I worked at a restaurant, and getting out at 1 in the morning on the weekends wasn't unheard of. My coworker who usually rode with me on days we worked together had gotten a ride from his girlfriend, so I was alone. Usually where I live, the summer nights are warm with a light breeze, and I actually love riding at night. There was no traffic, no families on bikes clogging both lanes, and all that kind of stuff. I pretty much always got back within 20 minutes of leaving, max 30 if I was really going slow. And this night was different though. From the get-go, as soon as I walked out the door, it was really cold, which is unheard of. So I decided to just ride fast and get home quick. It actually starts off pretty normal. I'm going over a bridge that goes over a freeway, and then it makes a weird turn. The street lamps behind me start to make a loud electrical noise, so I look back. It's as if something was approaching the lights behind me, and they start to flicker one by one. I'm a little spooked out at this point, but then I hear what sounds like another biker coming along the path behind me, and I feel relief that there's another person nearby me. Then the noise changes. It turns into a whistling, howling noise that rushes by me, actually flapping my shirt. Now, I'm on borderline freaking out at this point, so I ride even faster. I keep hearing sounds like whispering behind me, and multiple times it felt like something would snag the back of my shirt or even the pants on my leg. Keep in mind, this bike path looks nearly identical from start to finish. It's just a path of dead grass on both sides and walls with houses. Very easy to lose track of where you are. So I keep riding and riding faster, and my heart is going faster than ever before. I'm on a fixed gear truck bike, so I can get it moving pretty quick when I want to. So I'm tearing down this path, and I never see a single sign of life the whole way down. No cars crossing at intersections, no people on back porches, just the path lights flickering behind me and noises that sound almost human right behind me the whole time. I finally make it onto the road I turn on to get to my house. It's dead empty. There are 0 cars, and even in my semi-small town, this is unheard of. There's always cars stuck at a light or even at 7-Eleven on the corner, but there's no one anywhere. So I kept going, the light-sounding noises still behind me. I get right in front of my door and unlock it, and take my bike straight up through the door. I wasn't going to mess around and open the garage. I go up the stairs, and that's when the most terrifying part happened. I looked at the clock. It said it was 3:12 a.m. Now, it had taken me almost 2 hours to get home, and I still have no idea how it took me so long. I have no resolution for the noises, or even the flickering lights or the complete absence of people. But needless to say, I never took that bike path again.
I've been a police officer in Mineral Wells, Texas for about 5 years now. If you're wondering, Mineral Wells is about 50 miles west of Fort Worth and has a population of about 16,000. The people here are salt of earth type people, God-fearing, hard-working kind. But something has always been a little off about them, almost like they're carrying a secret that nobody's supposed to know. Mineral Wells become a ghost town after about 7 PM. That's at all of the drive-in stops, and it's really eerie, to be honest. It's very safe for my patrol car though. Now, in the 5 years that I've been there, I've never seen anything or heard anything strange. I don't believe any of the things I hear most of the time. If I hadn't had my own strange experience when I was a child, I'd probably be thinking I was crazy, but I'm not. The thing is that sometimes things happen that are truly unexplainable. They are real. I'd like to relay one of those experiences to you. Perhaps I can tell you. I have a ton. Now, to understand Mineral Wells, you have to know about its history. I learnt most of this when I visited the Historical Society after about 6 months of moving there. Apparently, it was founded in 1881 by a guy named J.A. Lynch. After Lynch dug up the first drinkable water, he claimed that there was something strange about the water though. Apparently, it was able to cure some of his wife's illnesses. It was almost like miracle water. Very soon after, word got out about this miracle water. Quickly, a second well was discovered, then a third. A woman decided to drink from the third well to try and cure her dementia. Guess what? She was miraculously cured. The local children started calling the third well the crazy water well, and they started just calling it the crazy water. It was strange how this miracle water flowed from the earth. News about this crazy water spread far and wide, and by the early 1900s, Miracle Wells had become the South's greatest health resort, with hundreds of mineral wells, bathhouses, bars, hotels, etc. People travelled all from over the country in hopes of experiencing this amazing healing power. As you'd probably imagine, many of the visitors were old or dying. Today, Mineral Wells is a shadow of its former self. Whilst it still has industry, it mostly operates as a tourism and retirement community. But don't let that fool you. In this town, there's a famous quote that says, "The past is never dead. It's not even the past." Now, after I'd been on the force for about a month, I had my first experience of strangeness of Mineral Wells. We got in a frantic 911 call about somebody finding a dead body. I still remember the address. It was at Baker Hotel. I was working nights there. Apparently, that's where the rookies start, and the call come in at about 12:30 am. My partner and I were in the area, and it didn't take us long to get there. When we arrived, the 911 caller was gone, but the body was there, just as I had described it. It turned out to be a young woman. She was splayed out on the red brick steps that led up to the front entrance. Her back was broken and whatnot. It was honestly the first time that I'd ever seen anything like this. She had fallen from a great height. I remembered looking up to see if there were any balconies that she could have come from, but there weren't any. But there were plenty of windows since it was an old hotel. They didn't have very good safety features like modern hotels do. In fact, many of the windows were left open. I later learnt that the Baker Hotel had been shut down in the 70s, but no one would ever admit as to why. We secured the team and called out an investigation unit. The girl turned out to be a 29-year-old. She had been a resident of Mineral Wells her entire life and worked as a manager at a local cafe. On the night in question, Paulina had been out with some of her friends and was at a bar near the hotel. One of the girls that she had been out with had told the investigators that they had all been hanging out on the 7th floor of the hotel drinking after the bars closed. They suddenly realised that they couldn't find their friend anywhere. They began looking for her and found her clothes in a pile of one of the rooms next to an open window. When they realised that she had fallen, they called 911. There were only 2 bits of information they could offer. That the first was that she was called Paulina, and she had been overheard saying that she needed to go and meet Virginia. But none of them knew who her friend was. The second was that there were rumours in the town that she had been having an affair with the owner of the cafe she worked at, but none of them admitted ever seeing him with her. When I first heard all of this, it seriously disturbed me. By all accounts, she was a young, well-adjusted woman who had no reason to kill herself. Why would she do it? And why did she take off all of her clothes before doing so? After a full investigation, I didn't hear much about the case again. The investigators thought the circumstances were odd, but odd things happened in Mineral Wells all the time, and they were just pressing cases. This case was eventually closed. I didn't hear anything about it until about 5 months later, as I was poring over manuscripts at the Historical Society's archives. Then I came across a passage that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Here's what it had said. One story involving the Baker Hotel revolves around a woman known as Virginia Brown. As a resident of the hotel who was the alleged mistress of T.V. Baker, the owner and builder of the hotel, according to legend, Virginia was upset over the affair and drunkenly plunged to her death after jumping from the 13th floor. Many visitors to the hotel before it closed in 1972 have reported seeing a dead woman, sometimes wearing a red dress and sometimes not wearing anything at all. She roams the halls after midnight. This freaked me out, and I was about to note right out of there, but I've suddenly realised there was a reference to another document. It turned out to be the hotel's ledger from the mid-1900s. I searched for Virginia Brown's name and found it. She'd become a resident at the time, and there was a notation under the room heading, Room 714. It was at this moment that I realised that there was something seriously wrong and strange about Mineral Wells.
I've got a story that I rarely tell, because it always freaks me out. At the time I was 18, just graduated high school. I didn't go to college right away. I actually took a break and picked up a second job instead. For my second job, I worked a third shift, 10 p.m. to 5 a.m., with 4 other people on a rotated schedule, no more than 3 a night, sometimes 2. After a few months, I became friends with my coworkers. We'd take smoke breaks and eat lunch in the back, play music, etc. Honestly, it was a chill job and I actually liked it. Working at night can mess with your brain though. I realized that. However, my body had completely adjusted and I was always energetic and ready to get the shift done. At this point, I should probably say that when we worked, all the doors were locked and there was absolutely no way to go in or out without triggering the nightly alarm that automatically sets. One night when we showed up, before our manager left for the night and locked up, He told us it would only be my co-worker, I'll use the name Mike, and I, as our scheduled third, we'll call him Jake, called in sick about an hour ago. Me and Mike had no problem. I was probably closest to him because he was my age, and I had my dad as a teacher at his school. We start our usual routine with walking around the store with my manager to ensure nobody is there. Then we check the alarm and watch him lock the doors on his way out. We decided the first order of business was to smoke a cigarette in the back of the warehouse. The smoke detector was a good ways up, and we never had an issue with setting it off. Now, here's where it gets wild, so stay with me. Me and Mike pulled the pallet stacked with boxes out from the warehouse and onto the main floor. I grabbed a dolly with some boxes of dried goods and headed to a different aisle so we could be ahead of schedule. We always typically split up for efficiency. About 15 minutes pass and I head back for more boxes. The pallet was in the central point in between us. Neither of us were in the same aisle as it. When I got there, I saw a bag of chips and dip opened on the pallet, with obvious dip marks in the dip. Now, we often ate food and left cash at the customer service desk. Our manager was okay with it. Mike met me at the pallet as I was loading up my second trip. I jokingly made fun of him for getting chips and dip because it seemed like an odd snack during work. He looked me dead in the eye, and I saw his face visibly change and say, "Oh man, that's yours." Apparently, my face did the same when I told him it wasn't. Obviously, Jake was there pulling a prank on us or something, and the manager went along with it, right? Well, no. At this point, we decided to be logical and check the store to catch whoever is doing this. We both have goosebumps the size of mosquito bites on our arms as we try to laugh it off, but something just felt off. Way off. It just seemed a little colder and we were both on edge. We sweep the warehouse in the back and the break room and we don't find anything. No dice. As we get to the front of the store, there's only one entrance to the store and it's right near all the 12 registers we had. In the front, there's big metal racks where we sold charcoal for grilling and also those big logs that burn really slow so people that can't survive on their own can escape the city and enjoy campfires. As we walk inside of it, we hear a whoosh and 3 logs flew off the shelf. Now I'm not gonna lie to you here. I screamed and Mike jumped. We were freaking out at this point, but I stopped and convinced him to walk to the shelf with me, about 15 feet away, so we could check and make sure the shelf was sturdy. With 2 adults, over 170 each, we couldn't budge it. Something threw the logs off in front of our face, and as we walk around the store again, trying to find somebody, we don't find anybody. We decided the best thing to do was to continue to work and listen to loud music. We ended up working together the rest of the night. Now, here's the craziest part. We got done a little early, so at 4:50, 10 minutes before day shift came in to relieve us, we started goofing off on those electric scooters for the handicap that were parked in the front. It's critical that I tell you the front had big glass windows, so you could see both in and out from the parking lot. We kinda just didn't talk about what we saw after it happened. I went to sleep that day and woke up to a call from Jake. He sounded like he was having a panic attack. His mom, who worked there during the day, was one of the ones that came in at 5. She was older. Working there was more of a way to keep busy than out of necessity, I think. Jake told me on the phone that when I left, his mom started talking to him in the office, where we clocked in and out. She asked him, "Who is by the door in all black watching you guys on the scooter?" Needless to say, I couldn't sleep. Mike and I never worked alone after that. Later on, I found out that his family had a history of weird experiences like this. Whatever happened that night scared the hell out of me. It wasn't after me, but to this day, I still get spooked.
I live deep in the Alaskan bush. I grew up there. For those of you who don't know what the bush is, it's basically where the mountain men are. They're all extremely self-sufficient. Anyway, I was born and raised on my grandpa's homestead. They migrated from Norway and somehow got the idea to live there. Some things about my grandparents. They're both very much of the old ways. They believe in the spirits. Also, they're very used to living off the land. Now, when my grandparents moved to their homestead, they made friends with our closest neighbours who are a few hours away. They are a tribe of Native Americans who refer to themselves as the Dene. I think my grandparents got on well with them because they had similar beliefs. Anyway, I remembered waking up in the middle of the night out of a heavy sleep. Not groggy at all, like I'd just been awake for hours. Normally I'd go back to bed, but for some reason I felt the need to get a drink of water. I wasn't even thirsty, I just felt the need to get a drink. I remembered opening the fridge, grabbing the jug of water and pouring myself a glass. I don't know how to explain this part. I tried to put it into words for 15 years. I felt a compulsion to look to my right and just out of the kitchen window. I wasn't forced or anything, it was just a nagging feeling. That's when I saw it. It literally gives me nightmares to this day. I thought it was an animal at first, unlike anything I'd seen before staring directly at me. It had the antlers of an elk, but its face was messed up. It was almost demonic looking. Its eyes given away that it wasn't normal. It had forward-facing eyes, almost like a predator. It was very dark and I could barely see, but it had milky white teeth. Its mouth was in fact moving, but I couldn't hear what it was saying. It just stared at me. I wasn't afraid. It just felt like the sense left my body. I stared back for about 20 seconds, turned round and went to bed. I was just confused out of my mind. I was sure that I was sleeping this. I knew it wasn't anybody messing with me because how far the house is away, or if they were, it was very strange. The next morning I heard my father cussing and yelling, telling my uncles to grab their rifles and hunting gear. We had this big insulated chicken coop that could pass as a barn anywhere else, that we chained off every night so wolves or bears wouldn't get in. Well, something smashed into that coop and killed all the chickens. It's never happened before and never since. I remembered that as all of this was going on, I saw some of the tribe men talking to my grandfather. No big deal. They stop by every once a week to check up basically. My dad is still shouting and annoyed. I think it was an animal that I saw last night. My dad starts asking me for the details when I explain what I saw, and my grandfather and the Native American men immediately stopped talking. They came over and asked me to be very specific. I was sure I was dreaming about it being 9 yards tall. They then started talking amongst themselves and to my grandfather for a bit and said they'd be back ASAP. When asking what the hell was going on, we were told that we were visited by a paranormal spirit and that it was very dangerous, and out of respect that they would not talk into any more detail about what had happened. We were told never to talk about it, since speaking of it gives it power. None of us had this, but I had to get it off of my chest. I now live in the southwest US now, but to this day, I will not go into the forest alone or for extended periods of time. I was almost certain that what I saw was just in my sleep and not real, but thinking of it, who knows what could be out there in the wilderness like that, miles away from people and civilization. Thank you @ThecreepyFox for featuring on this video. It's a pleasure to work with you. Make sure you guys go and check out the other half to our collaboration on his channel. I'll leave a link in the description to that, and make sure you go and subscribe to him as he has a very good and interesting channel. Thank you again my friend, I really enjoyed working with you. Thank you everyone for watching. I'm going to be putting out my 70k special this week with a special guest narrator, so you should already like that. If you have any suggestions for videos you'd like to see me do, then please leave them in the comments below. If you have any other questions generally, then please leave them for me as well. Again, sorry my voice isn't 100% normal, my throat's still very strained, but again I can still push on, so I'm gonna. I hope you're all well and take care. Have a good day everyone.